Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wyss. I'm joined as ever by Jonathan Fadugba, and also a special guest for this show, Rafa Roldán, comes back onto the Nordic Football Podcast. Jonathan, Rafa, I hope you're well.
Hi, Steve. Hi, everyone. Yeah, no, I'm good. And Rafa, I have to sort of lean to you first and say, how you doing? Welcome back on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. And first of all, Steve, nice to hear you for the first time here in the podcast one-to-one. Hear you a lot of times, so it's a pleasure for me to be back here.
Absolute pleasure, Rafa, indeed, to meet you for the first time as well. And welcome to all the listeners. We've got a great show ahead. We're going to be talking about all the latest goings on up in Norway, Sweden. The Allsvenskan and Eliteserien are back in action after the international break. We've also got some big European matches coming up for this particular week. Jonathan, I know, for you, this is a really big game as an avid follower of Swedish football.
Yeah, this is huge. To be honest, it doesn't get bigger than this. To be honest, really, in our leagues, Champions League. It's the first time Malmö FF are in the Champions League group stages since 2015-16 season. So more than half a decade. And yeah, I think the whole of Sweden really secretly is buzzing about it. I mean, even though certain teams from Stockholm might not, let on. I know there's a lot of enmity between the sides, a lot of rivalry, but really, if you sort of widen it out and really think about it and analyze it, for Swedish football, this is a big thing really to have a side make it all the way to the group stages. It's been a while, and I think the glamour that it will bring to the Swedish league, it helps it just keep it in the thinking of everybody. It's better than having, say, a Bulgarian team for Swedish football, I think, to be honest. So even though certain fans might deep down hate it, they'll probably still be watching these games. Malmö, Juventus, Malmö, Chelsea, Zenit, St. Petersburg. What a group stage we've got in store. And so, yeah, we're going to start this show we thought, we're going to analyze Malmö, Juventus, the game. And we thought to ourselves, who better to speak to than a performance coach and analyst in Rafa? So, if you haven't listened to the last episode, Rafa Roldán is a really interesting interview in terms of what you do and your work. But what we're going to do now is we're going to sort of put it into practice, aren't we, on this episode? And we're going to sort of try and break down not only Malmö, but also Juventus. So do a proper kind of analysis of this game, what to expect. So Malmö fans who are listening, maybe, you might get a glimpse into how the team will get on. And also if you're new to the show, just a general analysis and that we often tend to do. So, yeah, I mean, I guess the best place to start really is with you, Rafa. I mean, I know we talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but I don't think they played the final group game at that point. How impressed have you been with Malmö this season?
Well, as I was spoke in the previous show, I think Malmö has been very impressive this year. I think the speed and the intensity of the game they have shown in times in the league and especially in Europe has been above the level in Allsvenskan. I think that is a matter of details that they are not leading the league more comfortable. They have lost the lead or the game in the last minute already in two games at home, which is very strange for them. Also very strange to lose points at home against a team like Östersund in the beginning of the season. But it has been really impressive. If we are talking about the level of the rivals and the history of the rivals they have faced in the qualification, we have to remember that this Malmö team has defeated Rangers and Ludogorets. Ludogorets, a team it's from Bulgaria. It's a country that we can think that not so much tradition, but it's a team that not long ago they were in the group stage of Champions League, and they have been always fighting in the last year for European positions. So for the achievement of this year for Malmö is great, not only for them, but it's also for Swedish football. Swedish football is going to be in the best show possible in European football this year.
Yeah, 100%. And there's such a buzz and excitement about this group stage, really, for Malmö. I mean, for anyone who isn't aware, obviously we have a partnership with Y-Scout, and we've just written a blog for them. In fact, it's just been published today, looking at two of their key men, Antonio Kolak and Veljko Bermancevic. So if you haven't checked that out before, head to @Y-Scout on Twitter or head to our social channels at Nordic Footpod on Twitter, and the link to the blog is there, and you can have a little read. Basically, in summary, I've written a report on Malmö, and the bottom line is they're the two key players, aren't they, in the I mean, Steve, I'm sure you'll ask me about them in a minute, but yeah, I think generally speaking, this is such a massive group stage. Malmö are expected to make about 19 million euros from their participation in the groups. It's a massive, event, an occasion. But I guess what we're going to try and analyze in this first part of the show really is how can they? Everybody knows going into this group stage, Malmö will be the underdogs. They're going to be the team that everyone expects to get beaten. We've got Malmö Juventus first game. Nobody's expecting Malmö to get anything from this whatsoever. But we're going to break it down, and we don't like to just lean towards underdogs and big boys. Let's actually look at it rationally, and that is why we've got you on, Rafa, to do a bit of an analysis. I know that's your day-to-day job. You prepare reports and you prepare for taking on teams. What can you tell us about Juventus? And when you look at it from an analyst point of view, how would you, if you were, say, working for Malmö, or if you were preparing, how would you prepare for this game? What would you be looking at, and what are the key things maybe you've seen from Juventus so far that we can expect?
Yeah, I always start to analyze a opposition team. First thing I do is a contextual analysis, and with this I mean, what is the situation of the team per today? We are talking about a Juventus team where the average age of the team is quite high. We are talking about a team that had a lot of players in the last stages of the Euros, and even winning, and then we have also in addition the comeback of Allegri. So it's something like probably they haven't had the more optimal preseason, and if that's not bad enough, we have to add that they have lost Cristiano to Manchester United in the last day of the market almost. So they have lost their best goal scorer and the maximum offensive threat they have had. So in that point of view, it's a team that they are not coming with a optimal preparation to the first games of Champions League. And then we see how they have done in the league. They have started the Serie A probably the worst in many, many, many years. They have played 3 games with only 1 draw. They haven't won yet. They have draw away 2-2 against Udinese, and lost home against Empoli, and then in the last weekend they lost against Napoli 2-1. So we are facing a team, or Malmö is facing a team that they are in the best moment, and they have to visit Malmö, which is not an easy trip. It's a team that, as we have been talking, for more than 5 years without European football, and it's a team that is going to give everything. So not easy first visit for Juve.
Yes, and I mean, I just want to say this group is Group H of the Champions League. Also in this group, Chelsea and Zenit St. Petersburg. Malmö, for those who are interested in the betting side of things, Malmö are 66-1 underdogs to win the group. So I don't know if anyone fancies a tenner on that. Chelsea, the favourites to win the group. Juventus, second favourites. Zenit St. Petersburg in third there. Realistically, you're probably thinking Malmö are going to be aiming for third place, and that drop down to the Europa League. But let's focus on this first match. It is at home against Juventus. Juventus are the favourites. They're 1.5 favourites. Fair enough, but it's not out of the question that maybe Malmö could get a shock here. Juventus, I think they've had a bad start to the season from what I've heard. I don't really know much about Italian football, but in terms of Juventus and their actual tactical setup for this game against Malmö, Rafa, how do you think they will approach this game being the strong favourite away from home?
I think like they have started with 3 different formations the first 3 games, from a 4-4-2 flat to a 4-4-2 diamond, and the last game with a 4-4-1-1. So it's a bit unpredictable what they are using. For sure, it's a back 4 with 4 players in the midfield. It will be interesting to see if they are putting a more offensive team because they think that they can get the control of the game and control of over Malmö, or they are gonna be a team like more like trying to get Malmö in counters. I think if I were Juventus, I will be very cautious about Malmö, as they have shown in the European nights, and I think probably they're gonna go with a 4-4-2 with very pressing Malmö in the build-up, trying to recover the ball high. They have done that in periods in the Serie A. But I think Malmö has to be also brave and try to play them, because they have had enormous problems in Serie A. If we're talking about data, they have conceded 1.67 goals per game. Meanwhile, they have scored only 1 goal per game. In expected goals, 137 for Juve and 191 for the rivals. So the team has been quite offensive against them and punished them when Juventus has lost the ball in their own third. If I have to think about the team they will put tomorrow, it will be, as I said, the 4-4-2. I think they will play with almost the same team they play against Napoli. Maybe they change a bit Rabiot for Cuadrado to be a bit more offensive. And as we spoke before starting the show, I think it will be very interesting to see if Allegri give against the chance to Mackenzie and McGanny and fight against that midfield that Malmö is going to put against them.
They're quite an aging side in general, but two of the younger players to keep an eye out in this Juventus team. Obviously, Kulusevski on one of the wings there. Actually, that will certainly have a lot of interest in Sweden. And McKennie, who is seen as this top US prospect, highly rated over there. And I suppose really they need that younger element to their team, because the rest of the side is. I mean, there's certainly a few old age pensioners in there, experienced though.
Yeah, if we are talking that the two central backs they have is Bonucci and Chiellini. Between them, they have more than 800 games in top football. Then we are talking about players that have been around in football for a long time. Schieni, the keeper, also a very veteran keeper. So yeah, I think it will be very interesting to see the youngsters tomorrow with McKennie and Kulusevski. I think both of them they're going to start, and there will be two players to watch. I don't know if they're going to be able to cope with responsibility of a European night away, but I think Allegri really trusts them, and it will be interesting to see them tomorrow.
Jonathan, in terms of Malmö, I mean, how do you see them setting up here? And I must remind the listeners, do have a read of your latest Y-Scout blog there, focusing on the Swedish champions. Two really important players who helped them get to this stage, Kolak and Birmancevic. I guess they're going to be the focal point for Malmö. But in terms of tactical setup as well for Juventus, do you think they're just going to try and sit back, soak up the pressure, or are they actually going to have a bit of a go?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that listening to Rafa there, what you say, and as someone who's worked, for Ostersunds as an analyst and performance coach, it's interesting to hear what key things you look for when you're preparing for a match. One of the things that has caught my eye when you're talking about Juventus there, you said how bad they've been to start the season. I mean, they're fourth bottom of the league at the moment. I mean, it's incredible, really. I know it's only 3 games, but they're already 8 points behind Roma and Milan, which is, it's quite big already, even though it's early. 8 points, I think, in any title race, that's quite a big gap already. They haven't won a game yet, 1 draw and 2 defeats. So, as you've mentioned there, the amount of goals they're conceding and chances they're giving away, I think Malmö can fancy themselves here. I really do. I think it's going to be a packed atmosphere. I think that they're going to be really, really up for it. I noticed in the pre-match press conference, Max Allegri, the Juventus manager, has already come out and said this is a must-win game. So there is a sense they're feeling the pressure a little bit. I think there is a certain feeling that they cannot afford to lose this game. And just going to read you a couple of comments from Allegri. He said that it'll be very important, and this is something I was going to pick up on, when you mentioned, but the two forwards, who I'll talk about in a second. But yeah, Allegri said that it'll be a very technical game. It'll be important to play a very technical game, and avoid. Basically, we said we must focus. You can never predict what will happen in football, and we must be focused on the Champions League. We must play a technical game, and we must give away few set pieces, as they are a very physical team. We must play the game with serenity, and we must know how to improve regardless of the results. And I think that is going to be the key, really. This is going to be one of those games where Malmö are going to be itching to get set pieces. any kind of long throw-ins. They're very good at that side of the game. They're very, very dominant on set pieces. And I think that is the area that they can maybe catch out Juventus here. As Rafa mentioned, they've got an aging side, a team that's a little bit disorganized with the transfer policy and everything like that, losing Ronaldo. I know they brought in a few other players and things like that, but, they're not quite 100%. And then the other element in terms of set pieces, I think one of the reasons they're concerned about it is there's been a lot of criticism in the Italian media for Wojciech Szczesny, who Arsenal fans may remember him, the Polish international, used to play for Arsenal, of course. He's coming for a lot of criticism in the early part of this season. I think he's letting a few ricks this season, a few howlers, and Allegri had to sort of re-emphasize his confidence in the keeper. He said he's a top-level keeper. He will absolutely play tomorrow. So he's already kind of trying to build his confidence back. And even Bonucci has come out and said, Szczesny, we have to sort of keep Szczesny focused. We have to make sure he feels comfortable. So I think there is a sense here of vulnerability. I do think Juve are kind of a bit wobbly, and the last thing you want if you're a goalkeeper out of form and not feeling very confident is someone chucking in long throws at you into the box, someone peppering corners, free kicks. Malmö are a very physical side in terms of as Allegri has said, they will challenge for every single ball in the box, and I think that is an area they can exploit. Just talking about the Wisecout blog, I have to say I really enjoyed writing this. Sometimes, Steve, you probably feel this way as well when you write about Norway. There's some months where you're inspired and some months maybe you're not as inspired. I really felt inspired writing this. I really enjoyed it. Kolak and Berman Savic, they've really, I said in the piece, they're the two best signings in Allsvenskan this season. And I think you can probably make a good argument for that. They've combined, they've scored so many goals. I think it's 24 goals between them. They've been massive getting them to this stage of the competition. And I really think Kolak in particular will be someone that Juve need to look out for. Berman Savic will make deep runs from midfield, maybe play out wide and cutting inside and things like that. But I think that the strikers, I think the defenders will have a bit of a job on their hands keeping Kolak quiet. Now, don't get me wrong, Bonucci is world class. They've got a world class defenders. But it's going to be one of those games where the atmosphere, if Juventus go into it with a bit of a complacent mindset, thinking this will be an easy game, I think they'll get a wake-up call very quickly. So, I can't wait for it. I think it's going to be a really exciting game. And then the next round is Juventus-Chelsea and Zenit against Malmö. So, if Malmö can get a point here or even 3 points, they set themselves up pretty nicely knowing that Juve and Chelsea will play each other next. So, all to play for. I'm quite looking forward to it.
I think we're going to have to do predictions before we sign off, aren't we? So I'll start things off. I'm going to say Juventus do win it 2-1. But what do you think, Rafa? Can Malmö get anything?
Yeah, just about what Jonathan said. I think like in the last 3 games, Juventus has conceded 25 corners. So I totally agree with what Allegri said. And also if we are talking about how Malmö can even dominate the game, they are going to be 3 midfielders probably. So I think they can be dominating in the midfield against the 2 central midfielders in Juve. Man for man, the squad of Juventus obviously is better. So in my prediction, thinking about how Malmö can outnumber Juve in central areas, but taking in consideration the quality Juve has, I will go for a 2-2 game.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable prediction. I'm just looking at the goal scorers for Juventus this season. They drew 2-2 at Udinese. Dybala and Cuadrado scored. Deulofeu scored in that game for Udinese. Didn't know he was there. Then they lost at home to Empoli, and then they lost at Napoli. I think this is going to be a tough game for Juventus. I think Malmö, I'm going to go for a 2-1 win for Malmö. I'm going to say they're going to get a sneaky result. But to be honest, that's probably my heart, really. I think realistically, a point is probably, like Rafa said, probably may be what happens. I think Juventus will have that strength. But I really think they're going to be up against it. And if they don't deal with set pieces, and if they don't deal with the crowd, and they are lacking in confidence, then I think Malmö may have a sucker punch for them, because they are really flying at this moment. They're so confident. They're really enjoying their football. And I just think they're going to be really super up for this game. It's affecting them in the league, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But yeah, I just think that these games in the Champions League, these 3 games, they're going to be so up for it, the fans and everything, that I think they may cause a small upset.
Do you know what? You are definitely not on the fence as much these days, Jonathan. straight in there with a prediction. Normally he'd be like, well, I don't know, maybe a draw. But he's straight in there with the prediction there. But yeah, great analysis, guys, of this match ahead. Thanks to Jonathan for that. And Rafa, appreciate your time on the Nordic Football Podcast again in approach of this game. It was great to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me as always.
So moving on to Allsvenskan matters now, and the round after the resumption from the international break. I'm just going to go through some of the results now. Sirius 1, Ostersund 0, Malmö 1, Norrköping 1, Kalmar 4, Degger 4, 1, IFK Göteborg 2, Halmstad 0. Yet another under 2.5 game for Halmstad, by the way there. Djurgården 4, Hammarby 1. A rare Stockholm Derby win for Djurgården. More on that in a minute. Örebro 0, Varberg 3. And Varberg are on fire right now. Mjällby 0, Aikor 0. Bit of a surprise there. And Elfsborg, they're well and truly in the title race with a 4-2 victory against Häcken. So really, there's only one place we can start here. It is in that Stockholm Derby. We quite rightly had plenty of criticism for Djurgården after they lost to Aikor recently in another derby, but they've put that one to bed now by beating the green half of Stockholm 4-1. A big win for Djurgården. They're joint top of the table with Aikor now. Convincing victory, Jonathan.
Yeah, this was a huge occasion, to be honest. One of the biggest games of the season. I think it could even be a turning point in the title race. The ghost of Stockholm. I don't know if we're going to call this episode Ghostbusters, but what I'm going to say to you, Steve, is who you're going to call, because the relief at the end of this game, I don't think I've seen anything like it, to be honest. The collective sense of like, phew, after Djurgården battered Hammarby, their Stockholm rivals, 4-1 in the derby. Now, if you haven't listened to the episode that we had a couple of rounds back, about 3 or 4 episodes ago, go back and listen to the beginning of it if you can, because we broke down in that episode like the history of this derby, why it's such a big thing for Djurgården, the terrible record in Stockholm derbies against AIK and Hammarby. Awful record. And it was in early August, 8th of August, they played AIK at home, and they got absolutely battered 4-1 at home. And after that, it was like an outpouring of just grief and emotional destitute. We talked about the tweets and the fans just so upset, saying, how can my kids look at this? How can my kids look at people in the mirror? How can they go to school with a Djurgården shirt on anymore? You've disgraced us all. The terrible record Djurgården have, such a poor derby record lasting over more than 10 years. It really is emotionally felt by Djurgården, and there were big calls, like we need improvements. This is not good enough. You're a joke. The fans, players have been getting abused. Manager's been under pressure. It was psychologically a massive damaging blow for them, even though they were top of the table at the time, I think. They followed that up, Steve, with a 1-0 win at Mjällby. Then they drew with Mjällby again. The fixtures reversed. And then they lost against Sirius the week before that, just before the international break. So there's just been this nervous tension at Djurgården. Just everything. Fans are just weren't happy. And in the 19th minute of this game, when Gustav Ludvigsson put Hammarby 1-0 up, you just thought to yourself, "Oh no, it's all happening again." The ghost is back, the ghost of Stockholm. They call it the ghost because it's like this, the derby ghost that follows Djurgården around. Whenever there's a derby, they just can't seem to get it right. The ghost turns up and they bottle it. But what could well go down as one of the greatest performances in recent modern history of Djurgården, individual performances, pulled it back, and they ended up winning 4-1. We will talk about Magnus Eriksson in a minute, how good he was, but yeah, a goal from Magnus Eriksson. It was actually a penalty miss, and then he scored. Then Halmar Ekdal, 39th minute flicked header from a Magnus Eriksson assist, left-footed cross, glanced in. Then it was Joel Asoro, first goal. Joel Asoro, I even wrote a Wisecout blog on him. Dedicated so much time to writing about this big signing that's going to change everything for Djurgården. He hadn't even scored until this game. And he get a lot of all less nervous energy he had. He's been having such a tough time of it. He was so relieved as well. He ran into the crowd. And then that man, Chile, Edward Chilifia with a brilliant goal to make it 4-1. And there were scenes in that stadium, Steve. I mean, there was 9,000 official attendance. But I tell you, that game, it felt like there was 39,000 in the crowd because Djurgården fans were going absolutely crazy. They've got rid of the ghost. You know, they will rub it in their faces against AIK just a month ago, and they've now got their revenge. And really, you know, it's not just the psychological element of this in terms of getting over that Derby ghost, but also, Steve, they're top of the table now with 12 games to go. AIK's result has really given them the momentum now. They've got the best goal difference. You know, they've scored 30 goals, conceded 14. And with 12 games left, Malmö dropping points. You know, okay, you've got Elfsborg in there as well. We've got quite an exciting title race. But, you know, Djurgården now, they might start looking at this and thinking, you know what, we've got the Derby ghost off our backs. Let's go and win that title.
I mean, I look at that table now. I'm actually worried for Malmö because they've got Champions League to deal with as well. And that I know that takes it out of teams sometimes. So this is a genuinely tough title race to predict. It's a four-way battle. I mean, I've got visions already here of that dramatic end of season when Djurgården won it last time, Jonathan. I mean, imagine if we got to that stage where we got two of the Stockholm sides right in the mixer. It would be kind of crazy, wouldn't it? It's, you know, but I mean, there's been drop points sort of the way. I mean, I didn't really see AK getting that draw against Mjällby, although Mjällby can be a bit of a tough side. Elfsborg just seem to have goals in them, really, when it matters. They've got the full of scoring. And, you know, Djurgården, I think it's fair to say no one really saw that 4-1 coming, did they? They just lost their way a bit and, you know, bounced back. You got to say fair play to Djurgården. I mean, we seem to have this conversation every week, but, I mean, which sort of direction are you swinging in now in terms of, you know, the title battle? Who do you think is going to pull away?
It's a tough one to answer, really. If you ask me today, I would say Djurgården. I think they got the momentum. I really think that's a massive win. You know, football is so much built on kind of confidence and motivation and that kind of thing. And I just think that for Djurgården for the last month, they've just been hung over. You know, AIK just smacked them it was like a punch in the mouth. AIK just smacked them in the chops. You know, they'd won 3 in a row. They were doing really well in the league. And then this Derby ghost just came around again, and they just, you know, they've just sort of collapsed since that game, losing 4-1 at home to AIK, and AIK took on the momentum and got themselves into that title race. You know, don't forget AIK, Steve. Before this game, they were kind of before that Derby. Sorry, you know, they were the ones who were kind of struggling. You know, they had a good record, but they weren't. You know, they were nowhere near top of the league, if that makes sense. Since that Derby win, they've won 5 in a row. You know, they beat Halmstad, then they beat Djurgården in that derby, then they beat Sirius, beaten Häcken and beaten Örebro, and got themselves really into this title race. And if they'd won this evening against Mjällby, they'd have gone top of the league by 2 clear points. So it's a real blow for them to not win that game. I have to say, I'm quite surprised. I'll be honest, I didn't see the Mjällby game, so I can't comment on it right now. But you know, what I'm trying to say is, it's the momentum now will switch back to Djurgården. And the psychology of kind of just getting over that derby was such an emphatic victory, and it wasn't really as if it wasn't deserved. I mean, they really took a bit of a beating to Hammarby. Hammarby have had their own problems. A very interesting bit of team news there, Steve, that did the rounds. Akin Kumiamu was dropped from the squad completely. Now, part of that is because, you know, it's not been firing. You know, we talked about the Nigerian Messi-esque, we described him as at the beginning of the season, in the way he dribbles off that left foot. You know, that pace, the low center of gravity, some of the goals he scored in the Swedish Cup. But he's kind of gone off the boil a bit, and he was dropped from the squad completely. And he was criticised a lot after the game, the manager, for leaving him out. He mentioned that there's Hammarby have a lot of foreign players. So there's that cap on foreign players, essentially. You're only allowed to play, I think it's 8 or 9 foreign players in your matchday squad. And so they had to drop someone, and it ended up being Amu. So the manager came out and said, listen, if we'd won the game 4-1, no one would criticize me. But he's kind of held his hand up and said maybe it was the wrong choice. But bottom line for Milojevic, you know, his team fell apart. Don't get me wrong, he's in a very nice cream roll neck with a nice little suit jacket. But at the end of the day, it was Lagerlof and the joint managers, Kim Bergstrand, who were dancing at the end of that game. First derby win of the year. And it's not, as I said, it's not just the 3 points, it's the energy. They did a lap of honor, Steve, as if they'd won the Champions League at the end of the game. It was incredible, the relief in the stadium. They were so happy. Twitter as well has been they've just really got that monkey off their back, if that makes sense. They really just kind of, you can just sense the relief, and sometimes that can give you that positive energy, could take them now all the way. They've got 12 games left. Mentally, it's a hurdle they've overcome. And I think now they're gonna fancy themselves. I mean, next game this weekend, Steve, Malmö away. Malmö got Juventus. Can they overcome that? And the physical, expenditure that they're going to go for that. We'll see. But no, they can really, if Djurgården can get a win there, for example, they could even almost bury Malmö in the title race with 11 games to go. So, after that, then they've got Djurgården, then they've got Degerfors, Östersunds, and then they've got another derby early October away to AIK. So they've got a lot of big games coming up, actually. The next game after that is Elfsborg. So, long way to go. But I would say for Djurgården now that I think they've got sort of kind of the momentum's with them right at this moment in time. And the other team I just want to touch on, Steve, that we can't rule out, I have to say a big shout out to Elfsborg, because, last season after doing so well, I didn't really think they could repeat it. I think I predicted them around fourth. But they've really got themselves, they finished second last season. Obviously, it was a 9-point gap. But they've really got themselves into this title race now. They're 1 point behind. They're scoring goals for fun. They don't concede too many. Only 17 conceded. It's not bad. And they have not lost a game, Steve, since May at Malmö. So although they had a bit of a dodgy start to the season, lost 4 matches, they've since been incredible, really. And they've beaten Häcken this evening. And that's part of a nearly 10-game run now, unbeaten. So, Elfsborg, you can't rule them out at this moment in time. The next game's Östersunds away, and then they've got Malmö at home. I think we'll learn a lot about them in those 2 matches. If they can beat Östersunds, which they should, and then if they, we'll see what they've got against Malmö to potentially really put themselves in the running with 10 games left.
I mean, I hope Elfsborg win it. I would love to see them win it. Someone different, isn't it? But just before we tie up Allsvenskan, do you know what I've kind of noticed here? And it's been a while since I've said this. It looks like the only free hits, the easy wins is against Östersunds and Örebro. Everyone else can be awkward. I mean, even Mjällby, that people are dropping points against them. Degerfors are in a bit of a bad form. It seems like, though, anyone in this league at the moment can be awkward opposition if you get them on the wrong sort of day. That might be why, all of these top 4, they have dropped quite a few points at times this year. I don't think it's going to be a ridiculously high points tally needed to win the league this particular season. Has the strength of the league in general gone up a bit suddenly, Jonathan, would you say?
It's a really good question, actually. Yeah, really, really good question. It's hard to know. I think at the top of the table, there's been a slight improvement. I think obviously post-COVID, everyone's kind of, it's a bit like the Premier League at the moment. Everyone's kind of excited to be back in front of fans, and that gives an extra maybe 5-10%. Teams are kind of just really excited to play and that kind of thing. There's a bit more edge to the games. I think that it's a good time to have that conversation just because of what's going to happen next, which is Malmö in this Champions League. Now, I mentioned in my Wisecout blog that they've, there's 19 million euros they're going to get out of this guaranteed. And that's not even including if they win any of these games. If they beat Juventus, for example, that's an extra 2 million, I think, in the coffers for prize money. I think you get 900,000 euros just for a draw. So a lot of debate at the moment is kind of, is this the end of competition in Allsvenskan? Everyone's thinking that Malmö getting to the group stage means that they now can go on again and just dominate the league. And obviously nobody really wants that. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think recruitment has been massive, more so than ever in this league. I think that what we saw in the winter, Steve, in the winter window, was that a lot of teams had to rely on signings from maybe lower league teams, and also maybe 1 or 2 punts that no one knew about. And I think why Elfsborg are in the title race is because they've got their recruitment spot on for the last year to 2 years. We talked about sort of Joseph Akuma, who they sold on to Belgium. They've done really well recruitment wise, and I think that smart recruitment has turned them from a sort of team going nowhere to second in the league now. They've played in Europe and now they're title contenders. And I think the teams around that bracket of mid-table, I think the ones who have done good recruitment have managed to turn themselves into sort of contenders, whereas teams like maybe, EFCO have done bad recruitment, and I think that kind of reflects on where they are in the table. Fighting relegation to a certain extent. They got a 2-0 win against Halmstad, but they've had a lot of issues with their squad, and kind of lost a lot of games. The difference between someone like them and someone like Elfsborg, I mean, they're probably a bigger club than Elfsborg, all things considered. But Elfsborg are third in the table and 1 point off the title. And I think that is because they've got their recruitment right. Malmö, and why they've been so good is because their recruitment's just been really good this season. I think with Berman Savic and Kolak and one or two others as well who have really done well. I think their recruitment has improved them, and that's why they've got to the Champions League level. And I think that is the core message here, really. If you've got either really good coaching, like Kalmar, a team like that with their possession-based style, or if you've got good recruitment, Norrköping's recruitment hasn't been too bad, and they're sort of up there. Djurgården generally tend to get their recruitment quite right and quite well. AIK have just about started to turn things around from that point of view as well. So I think good coaching, good recruitment is just narrowing those gaps. But the question will be, obviously, when Malmö get 19 million, what are they going to do with it? Are they going to just go on another level? But I think like you said, if you look at someone like just to briefly touch on Kalmar, beating Degerfors 4-1. With their possession-based style, it's incredible how they've turned things around there. And so the point I'm trying to make here is that if you can get those little marginal gains right, then you can have a decent season. I mean, you've got Varberg Boys in 8th at this moment in time. So it really just tells you that the league is quite competitive at this moment. And I think that's a really good thing in general for Allsvenskan. Yeah,
it's one of those, the way I see it, if Malmö don't win the league next season, then something very weird's going on, because they're going to have a decent treasure chest, aren't they, to open. But they haven't been able to do anything with that money because of the way the transfer window operates in Sweden for the rest of this season anyway. So this is the chance for them other three teams to really lay it down this year, especially with them still in Champions League as well. So I think the other three teams will know that this is their opportunity, especially the two Stockholm sides. They've got to put the hammer down now and try and put some distance between themselves and Malmö before it looks like Malmö's fixtures do get favourable towards the back end of the season. So it's a really interesting battle. For those listening, this is a good league. If you ever want to follow a league sort of outside of the mainstream Europe, this is a good one to follow right now. It's a four-way battle. Get yourself supporting one of them top four sides, and hopefully it comes down to a really epic conclusion again, like it did before. So really exciting stuff at the Allsvenskan right now, Jonathan.
Yeah, and just to wrap it up, I did mention this on the last episode before Rafa came on, I think, 2 episodes ago, I believe. Just playing into what you've said there is a massive this is an existential debate in Allsvenskan at the moment, the transfer window. What are they going to do with it? Because there's a massive call to move the Allsvenskan window to transfer window to the end of September. And the teams that want it, obviously, are the teams that want to be able to do their recruitment now. Teams like Malmö, I think Hammarby are kind of pushing. I think their sporting director wants it to be in line with the European teams till the end of August. But then also that kind of means that, if a Malmö, for example, like you just said there, if they had qualified and the transfer window was changed, they could now go out after getting into the Champions League, maybe go and buy 3 or 4 extra players with that money. But because the window ends in July, ends mid-August, they hadn't actually qualified yet. So that is a massive. The decision is going to be apparently made in September. There's been loads of talks between the clubs and the Swedish FA and the Elite Football Association. That decision is going to really potentially could change Allsvenskan for years to come, because if they keep it, it just means that Malmö might not be able to dominate as much, or anyone who's kind of flying at that moment in time in Europe. But if they move it, it gives them a bit more time to go out and buy a few more players, and that could really alter the landscape of the league. So it's a big decision, actually, and we're due to get that in the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, this season in particular, that would have been big. I don't think we're going to get many situations where teams do qualify for the Champions League group stage from Norway or Sweden. But in this instance, if suddenly Malmö are given another, 12-13 million pounds, roughly, is it, just for doing the group stages? They definitely would have forked out to buy some players, if only just for depth more than anything. But I'm sure they could have reinforced that squad and almost given themselves a great chance to both compete in, domestically and in Europe. So it's crucial. I think, to be honest, if it was me, I would have it in line with the Norwegian window. Norway is at the end of August. that way it's fair for everyone, to be honest with you. But in this particular, by the way it's gone this year, it's almost helped the league to be more competitive for the rest of the season. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, 100%. And just to wrap it up on that, if you need an example of kind of how it can distort the league, depending on when the window changes, all you've got to do is look at one of the key players in that Ludogorets game, a player they got from Degerfors, and that is the goalkeeper, Ismail Diawara. Now, that's a really, really great story. Lovely, lovely story. This is a player who's been playing in the lower leagues of Sweden pretty much his entire life. He was at this time last year, he was, I think, at Degerfors, just in the second division, wasn't really sure if he's going to have a career. And then, Malmö got an injury in the Ludogorets second leg, and they had to they signed Diawara in this window from Degerfors. He'd done so well for Degerfors that Malmö sort of picked him up just to be their second goalkeeper. But he came in to that match and against Ludogorets and made his Champions League debut. And he's been really, really good, actually. He's one of those sort of feel-good stories that you get sometimes. He's 26. He'd only been at the club for 2 weeks, and he didn't even expect to play a single game. He left Degerfors thinking he would just sit on the bench. And next thing you know, he's playing in the Champions League. And so, he said that for him, it was like he never expected this. And, he said he feels so great about it. And it's just a really nice story, isn't it? But it also shows you, Steve, that, if they could go and pluck a few other players from teams like Degerfors and others, and if they had an extra few weeks in the window, they could have maybe bought one or two. They bought Martin Olsson as well from Häcken, Malmö. So that ability to pluck, it's a bit like Bayern Munich do that a lot, don't they? They just pinch from the German league. Anyone is good. Haaland may be next. So yeah, it's quite a key decision there. But nice feel-good story there for Ismail Diawara. Good luck to him.
All right, well, stay tuned. Join us after the break. We're going to talk about the Norwegian Eliteserien and a final transfer window roundup from Norway. So stay tuned. Catch you after the break.
Welcome to part 2 of this episode of the Nordic Football Podcast, and we are over to Norway now. And, well, sadly for you, Steve, there's no representative in this season's UEFA Champions League. I'm just chuckling away while I say that, rubbing it in a little bit in your face. But for Sweden, it's a nice sort of a few weeks coming up. But don't get me wrong, there's still a few teams at Conference League we've got to look forward to, isn't there? And also Europa League as well, and that kind of thing. So we will touch on that shortly. But before we do that, it is it's an interesting title race at this moment in time, isn't it? So the plan for this section, we're going to sort of just briefly look at the title race and see where we are with 12 games left. Everyone's played 18 now, so everyone's caught up on the calendar. And then we will sort of talk about the transfer window, because we weren't through the transfer window before the international break. So this is our first episode since it closed. So we're just going to touch on the main sort of big signings, players that you might need to look out for. Even if you play fantasy football, for example, and you're still doing the fantasy team, there might be one or two you might want to put in your team. So we're going to just touch on the key transfers as well. But the best place to start right now, Steve, is the weekend just gone. And there's been some interesting results, hasn't there? I'm just going to read through the results, in fact, because some games here that I don't personally think expected to happen. Mainly Bodø/Glimt won, odd one. That was quite a big result in the title race. But I'll read through them in order. Got quite a shock result on the Saturday, 11th of September. Lillestrøm 2, Brand 3. Stabæk 1, Viking 3. We've got Bodø/Glimt 1, odd 1 on the Sunday. Then we've got Haugesund 2, Sarpsborg 1. Molde battering Mjøndalen 4-0. Sandefjord beating Vålerenga 3-0, which is a big result, isn't it? And Strømsgodset 1, Kristiansand 2, and then finally Rosenborg 3, Tromsø 2. Now, in terms of the title race, that means that with 12 games to go, we have Kristiansand still in third on 32 points. We've got Bodø/Glimt in second, 35 points. And 1 point ahead of them on top of the table is Molde with 36 points. And just down the bottom, all on 13 points at this moment in time. 16th, bottom of the league, Stabæk, minus 18 goal difference. Brann, minus 16 goal difference, 15th in the table, second bottom, both in the relegation spots. And then in the relegation playoff spot, Mjøndalen, 13 points again, but -7 goal difference, slightly fewer goals conceded, only 27. So what's your analysis with 12 games to go, Steve, over the top and bottom of this league?
Yeah, it was there was quite a few shocks, and it doesn't surprise me. Historically, throughout the whole of Europe, throughout the whole world even, the first round back after the international breaks in September is notoriously one of the hardest rounds to predict. You can often get a lot of shocks, new signings settling in. You have had the international break, players missing, and all sorts of stuff like that. I suppose realistically, you've got to say there's 6 teams still in this title race, if we're going to be fair. But in my opinion, there's only 2 teams that can win the league. And I've said that all year, Molde and Budapest. And Molde, for me, will go on and get the gold medal. A nice 4-0 win against Mjøndalen, a comfortable win against a team that can be awkward opposition. Molde have got a lot of things in their favour towards the end of the season. No European matches. The team now it's going to be more settled, and I think they have had mid-season slumps before and they've come out of it. Budapest, just that result just against Odd just kind of sums their season up. That you feel they're motoring, and then something weird happens to let them down. They just haven't been as free-flowing in terms of scoring this year. 37 goals in 18 games, really low for them, considering the amount of goals they scored last season. And I think it's only going to get worse for them. Worse. It's going to be a continuation of inconsistency throughout this autumn period because they're involved in the Conference League. And I think for them, it's a big thing, the Conference League. They're going to enjoy themselves, but for them to juggle domestic European matches is going to be hard. So I think Budapest will continue to drop points. It's just a question of how many they drop and whether they're good enough to stay in second, or could they drop potentially even out of the medals. There's no doubt the teams below them. I mean, Kristiansand, for me, that if they stay in the top 3, I would be stunned. But I think the likes of certainly Rosenborg, some Viking might think, you know what, there's a chance here to catch the second place or even first right now. But yeah, it's interesting stuff. A bit like Sweden, I don't think it's going to take a huge number of points to win this league. And then down the bottom, obviously, it's nip and tuck. There's a lot of teams that are still not safe.
Yeah, and if we look at the results like you just said there, in terms of Glimt, you did mention they're in Europe, and they do have a really exciting Conference League group, actually. First time they've ever been in Europe, I believe, in their history. You'll confirm that for me. But just looking at their group stage, I mean, they got a meeting with none other than Jose Mourinho to look forward to. I don't know if anyone saw him sprinting down the touchline last night as Roma got a late winner. Classic Jose style, running off down the touchline. You can't knock Jose, can you? But they're in that group with Roma, Budapest, CSKA Sofia, and Zorya, who's their first opponent this Thursday. How do you think that will affect them in the title race? Because how will the squad cope with it, especially with the transfers they've made?
It's going to be a negative for me. Their squad doesn't have the depth, certainly the quality depth that a likes of Molde have had when they've been in Europe before, or even when Rosenborg were in Europe before. So this is going to be a real challenge for Budapest, especially the style they play. It's very high tempo, it's very high press. It was great last season. Their fitness levels were so good last season that it didn't matter. They went midweek and then weekend in the league domestically. But this is kind of the end of like a 2-year cycle where they've really put a lot into their football. And I think they will drop some random points. It's been away from home has generally been their problem, Jonathan. This year, home they've been pretty damn reliable. That was they still drop points. They've only lost one match at home all year. That was to Molde. But you know what else has happened this year? I'm not saying teams have found them out, but there's certain sides that have found a way to deal with them. Odd, for example, they got battered twice last year. I think it was 6-0 and 4-0. They beat them 1-0 at home, and they've just got to draw 1-1. So teams have found a better way of dealing with Budapest this year. They've finally woken up and realised there is potential things you can do to nullify this team. And it's almost like a sort of a second season syndrome. It was always going to be a come down from last year. More than I expected, actually. But it's been a combo of factors. I still think they're probably good enough to finish second, if I'm being honest, because they do have a lot of quality in their ranks. They've signed reasonably well in the summer as well, as I'll go on to soon. But yeah, going midweek, traveling, something they've never done before, it has, for me, you're going to drop some points somewhere. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the flip side of it is they've got a really exciting group stage, as I said, to look forward to in Europe. That'll be a real adventure for them, something they haven't experienced too many times. I mean, no one's experienced the Conference League because it didn't even exist until this season. So, yeah, new times for everyone. Their goal they conceded against Odd was a hell of a strike from Sander Svensson, set piece. So you mentioned their teams are finding them out. Maybe set pieces is an area. Second phase from a set piece. Sander Svensson absolutely powered in a shot from outside the box. Beautiful effort. Former Hammarby he was. I remember him. But yeah, he looks like he's banging in a few goals there for Odd. But let's start with Budapest Transfers because the players they brought in are Mal Pellegrino, Joel Mugisha, and Gilbert Coombston. We did actually speak about these players, didn't we? I think we touched on Amal. That transfer had already been done. And players they've got rid of, Tunekti, Lindau, and Rataj. A couple of others. I think I've got that right. But yeah, I think Pellegrino's the key there, isn't it? He's the one who's going to have a real impact, isn't he? The 31-year-old.
I think the thing with Pellegrino is they've got to think of him as a racehorse, and they've got to know when to run him, when to lightly run him and when to really push him hard and whip him hard, because he's not the sort of bloke who's going to be able to do for me, European matches and then a league match at the same. They're going to have to probably bench him perhaps in some league games. He's no spring chicken. And they've got a game manager. He does have a bit of a history of injuries sometimes. Gilbert Coombston, the signing of Coombston from Turkish side, Kasim Parsa, I think that's a good addition. He has a good history in the Eliteserien for Bran and Sondal. He has a knack of getting a lot of assists, does Coombston, and he puts a lot of crosses into the box. And it is the one area they did need a bit more depth with Sondre Searley getting injured. So yeah, they're reinforcing the area. That those two signings could just be the difference between them, being both competitive in the Europe and also sort of maintaining this title charge, and at worst sort of finishing second. So I like what they've done, and they've not lost anyone of significance.
Yeah, looking at moving on to the title toppers at the moment, table toppers at the moment, Molde. I mean, that was a pretty comfortable dispatching of their rival this season, Mjøndalen, wasn't it? They had lost 2 games though before that in a row, at Viking and away to Kristiansund. The next 2 games are Vålerenga away and Viking at home. I don't know if they have European competition to contend with, but what's your assessment of them so far before we look at their transfers? Because Owe was on the score sheet with 2, Erling Knudsen as well, and Ellingson as well, penalty. What's your assessment of Molde at this moment in time?
Yeah, I think we look at the games that drop points, and I don't think any of the drop points are a disgrace, really. Viking's a tough place to go. They were 2-0 up in that, and they somehow blew it. Kristiansund, it's a local derby, and Kristiansund were just up for it more that day. They are third in the league, so it's not like if they're dropping points to poor sides, then you get worried for them, don't you? But I think they can pick themselves back up again. They do need to start winning some more of these big fixtures again. They beat Bodø/Glimt earlier in the season, but they need to start, beating the likes of Lillestrøm, Viking, teams around them. It's not just about trashing the poor sides, is it? Sometimes. So I think they need a couple of big performances soon again, but they're going to be pretty happy that they're back on top of the table. They've got no Europe to contend with. In terms of the transfer window, they've lost some players, but they've gained some as well. And I think they're definitely the favourites to win the gold medal. Yeah,
you have said that a few times. To be fair, you are quite confident on Molde, and looks like with the results this weekend, you might be onto something there. Let's look at their transfers, because they've had Linus has come in from Galatasaray, Martin Linus right back, Rafik Zeknini left winger from Fiorentina, so they're applying from big clubs. 23-year-old left winger. Sivert Mansverk from Sondal. I think we touched on him briefly. A young player called Niklas Haugland, and then a couple of others who they've brought in, I think, from loans and that kind of thing. The key, though, really was the players they've lost. Stian Gregersen gone to Bordeaux for 1.8 million. 26-year-old centre-back. Marcus Holmgren Pedersen gone to Feyenoord. Fredrik Olsnes to Feyenoord. They've loaned out Matis Bolli to Stabæk as well, and a couple of other loans of goalkeepers. They brought in a good £3 million roughly there in terms of transfer profits, which Molde are quite good, aren't they, at bringing in some cash?
Very good club for that. And, Martin Linez is an ex-player of theirs, proven at this level. He'll do a good job for them. Zetnini was, for Eliteserien level, I mean, he was at Rosenborg before Odd. This player can play on the wings. He's a nice addition. I am worried about the loss. I mean, Orjan, as we've said before, that was a big loss for them. But Mansvert came in, and he could be an able replacement. I do worry how you replace Stian Gregersen. Gone to Bordeaux there for 1.8 million. That's a very good. I mean, you'll be delighted with that signing as a Bordeaux fan, Jonathan. Fantastic bit of business for Bordeaux. I think he's going to go really well there. Actually, great player. But I suppose that they will know behind the scenes they were going to lose Gregersen at some point. Probably were hoping at the end of the season. It's about now who steps up in that centre back role. That's probably the area where I'm thinking, you can probably get at Molde, Martin Björnbach and Sheriff Sinian. If anyone else goes down, they're looking at likes of Bert Riese at centre back or Martin Ellingson. So I think centre back is the area where they lack the depth. If injuries kick in there, they're in trouble. But they're well covered on all the other parts of the field. They've done their best to replace players. And, I'm excited certainly by, Mansvert especially. I think it's going to be very good. Yeah,
well, good luck to all of them in their new roles. And, good luck to Molde. Let's see how they get on. They're not in the Europa League. So, let's see how they focus. Now I'm going to move on to my personal favourites. Christensen. Above Rosenborg, above Lillestrøm, who you've written a Wisecat blog about, above Wålerenga. What is going on there, Steve?
Every year they defy me, don't they? And they fluke to win.
I do love it. You always predict them down the bottom, and this season they're doing it better than ever.
They fluked it at the weekend against Godset, a last-minute goal. Well, for once, I wasn't going to moan because I was on over 3 goals, so it got me a push. But, they didn't deserve the win. Strom's Godset deserved the win. Look, they've got a great home record this year. They've always been strong at home with the fans. 7 out of 9 home wins. That's pretty damn good, right? I actually like one of their signings. Moses Moore from Godset. Now, the last time they bought a player from Godset, it was Pellegrino. And look what they turned him into, an absolute monster. I think the same could happen with Moses Moore. I don't think he's been... Moore has had more of an effect at Godset than Pellegrino did. But he's exactly the same type of player, just younger. He'll play that inside forward role on the left-hand side. And I just know that the Christensen system and coaching will probably get more out of this player. So, it's early days so far. He's played 3 games, but they've won 2 out of the 3 he's been in. And I think give him a bit of time and he can make a really big impact for Christensen. They have lacked goals this year at certain situations. 24 goals in 18 is not a lot, is it? They're the lowest scoring team in the top half, I do believe. But Moore might just be the man. He's got that potential maybe that they have a knack of improving players, the Christensen. They just do. I can't see them staying in third, but this side they defy me, mate. They just keep achieving stuff that I don't think is possible.
Yeah, and another winner that came from a set piece. You're gonna have to do some digging on this Christensen team, Steve, because not letting you get away with this constant talking down of them. Every week they don't deserve it. They're third in the table. So we may have to get someone on to talk about Christensen to give a maybe slightly more impartial point of view, because I've got to say, they are defying you quite regularly. I don't know who. I mean, who's their manager? Is he
Christian Mickelson? Christian Mickelson, great manager for them, great fit for them. Low possession, probably wouldn't suit going to a bigger club because he's counter-attacking orientated, but I suppose he deserves maybe a chance.
Yeah, I think we may have to, if you're listening, come on the show. I would certainly love to hear from Christensen what they're doing, because there's marginal gains. For one season, fine, but this is 2-3 seasons now. They've been regularly sort of punching above their weight. I'd be very interested to know the methods behind Christensen. So if there's any of their fans listening, or any of their coaches or the manager, I'd love to maybe get them on the show. I'll do the interview, Steve. Don't you worry about that. I've got a nice soft spot for Christensen. Let's move on. I mean, yeah, if you look at their transfers, they haven't been hugely active. You mentioned the lad from Strømsgodset, is it? Moses Mawa?
Yeah.
Jesper Isaacson as well. They bought from Stabæk, 21-year-old. And then Lagos Kunga, who is Angolan and American origin, right winger, 22. I wonder how that was scouted. That's an interesting one. I don't know much about him. But yeah, they lost a couple as well. Flemmers Castrati, and they sold a few. Brought in a little bit of cash, I think. Sold Bent Sormo to Zulte Waregem in Belgium. Olas Skarsem's gone to Rosenborg, and Horenus Tadis has gone to Sandnes Ulf. And then they've loaned out Cameroonian forward Mumbangna. So, I mean, is that going to affect them, the ins and outs?
Skarsum was an underrated player for them. I quite like him. I think Ben Sormo, I was possibly end of contract. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, Skarsum's a bit of a loss. But, this Kunga, I looked at his profile photo. He's got that orange hair. He looks a bit of a lad, but I don't know much about him.
He's like a Taribo West sort of style, isn't he?
Yeah. I think he looks like he's been in America, Atlanta United, not playing for the first team much there, but who knows? A lot of sometimes these signings, you genuinely just don't know how they're going to do. They could be brilliant or they could be terrible. So, but look, I think they'll finish strongly still. I mean, probably top 6 from here. It's a remarkable run for Christensen though. They always, the manager gets the absolute maximum out of his squad year after year without fail. Yeah,
and Taribo West by looks, Lagos by name. I've got to say I've got a soft spot for this guy already. So keep an eye on Lagos Kunga. Let's see how he gets on. We are a bit short of time. We don't have a huge amount of time to go through every single transfer. But is there any clubs that you wanted to talk about that have, if you were to pick 3 clubs whose transfers could turn their season around, or 2 or 3 clubs, who would you, who's coming out of this transfer window looking, new, and who's coming out of it looking down?
I think one transfer I've got to have to mention is Henrik Hegheim, who's moved to Brøndby from Viking for 1.33 million. Pretty sure I've profiled him at least once on one of the Y-Scout blogs. A very good young centre-back. And I think he's moving at the right time to the right club. It's a nice little step up to Brøndby. He can continue his development in a better league. And, I could honestly see Hegheim moving to better pastures beyond that. I mean, there's some great value to be had in Scandinavia, really. You can see why it gets constantly raided. In terms of the most active clubs, Stabæk have been very active. They've actually picked up a decent fee for Antonio Nusi, the 16-year-old wonder kid. Surprise, he's gone to Belgium, Club Brugge. But that's a decent fee for Stabæk. They've signed a lot in, and they've got rid of a few as well. So very active transfer window for them. A very active transfer window for Brann as well. Whether it's enough to keep them up, I'm not sure. But certainly the Hegheim transfer really stood out. A window that did stand out to me was actually Sandefjord, because they didn't do hardly any business at all, which is unusual. I think they literally only brought 1 or 2 players in. Ian Smule is a left back from Feyenoord, and Chuma and Nene, a Norwegian/Nigerian centre forward from Midtjylland, and Musa G joined, but not much business there. Most of the clubs did a bit here and there, but interesting sort of window. Some players have lost players, but some clubs have lost players. Sorry, but ups and downs, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll wrap up. I mean, there's been a lot of transfers, to be fair. Quite a few. I mean, Dawda Bamba's left the league. He's gone to Turkey, left Brann. I think that's caught my eye. But there's a few others, as you've just mentioned there. I mean, it seems like this window, it seems like Norway's been raided, to be honest. I mean, I said the same thing about Sweden. He's at Bergman. Johannessen's gone from Norrköping. But of the published transfers out, there's already 12 million euros gone out of the league, and that's only the transfers that have been disclosed. So there's obviously undisclosed fees, and I'd say about 50% of them are undisclosed.
Yeah.
So to be honest, you could double that to sort of maybe 25 million-ish minimum. That's gone out of Eliteserien, which is huge, really. and just shows you the status of the leagues really in terms of how much they attract foreign clubs. But yeah, I mean, we've got one listener question which we'll probably wrap it up with. Thank you so much for your questions. You can follow us on Twitter at Nordic Foot Pod. We're not going to get through them all tonight because we've had quite a big episode here. But we have got one from Footy Analychris, Chris Hilliam. He said, thoughts on August Mickelson? How high is his ceiling and his likely best long-term position? I think that's an interesting one because obviously we are talking about transfers on this show in Norway. Steve, could you just tell us who he is? What Chris has asked about him. Obviously, he must be a player of note. Let us know the player, what's his position, that kind of thing, and then answer Chris's question.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Chris. Also, thanks to anyone who did tweet in a question. We are certainly not ignoring them. We will be storing them up for some more future episodes. But August Mickelson is an attacker at Tromsø. And this is someone who I think going into the season, you would have had him down in the depth charts as sort of backup, as a sort of a substitute, really, a bench player would make an impact. I mean, I had him down on my own personal spreadsheet as a primary winger, left and right winger. Can also play in the Tromsø. Tromsø play 3-5-2, so he can sort of play, left mid, right mid, wing, or whatever you want to call it. But he started the season off as playing up front as a striker alongside Moses Ebi. This was due to Bruno Espio's injury, which kept him out of action for a long time. So Mickelson sort of basically become this pacey advanced forward, I would say. It's probably the best role you can use him as. He's a small lad, but he's pacey, he's skillful. Obviously, with the sort of history of playing out wide, he can sometimes drift a little bit, but I've been quite impressed how he's adapted to the striker role. And I think he would work really well with like a target man in, say, a 4-4-2. I don't know whether he'd be as effective if he was just sort of a lone striker. And of course, it'd be interesting if he was to move somewhere that had like a 4-3-3 system. Could he go back on the wing and be as effective there? But certainly in the 3-5-2, he's certainly, I mean, if you think about sort of Moses Ebi is quite a quick lad as well, but he's more physical. So I think that's a good combination for him. It's just sort of all fast striker who can get in behind, tries to beat the offside trap a bit, half poacher as well at times. And he's a player that's impressed me this season, to be honest, Mickelson. I don't know what his exact stats are in terms of goal scoring, but he has been on the score sheet a bit this year, and decent player, John. I like him.
Thank you so much for your question. I hope that's answered your question there. We did have two questions, which I will not answer, basically, but I will touch on them, give a shout out to @Norgefoot, Norgefoot on Twitter, who said, who do you think are the 5 biggest under-21 talents in the Nordic region? And also a shout out to Harry HT 1996-21. He's also said the 5 brightest prospects under 21 in both leagues. I think we're going to have to, we're not going to answer those because we're going to have to go back to dust ourselves down after this transfer window, aren't we, Stephen? Reassess who actually in the league is under 21 because we've taken a huge beating this window. So many players left the leagues. Bergman Johannesson would have been a contender, but he's gone to Denmark, for example. There's so many players, and we're going to have to sort of dust ourselves down and just reassess it probably because we've bled players this window. Really have been a huge amount of transfers out in both leagues. But thanks for your question. We will probably touch on that in a future episode, so do tweet us again in weeks to come. I also want to give a shout out to Ben Yo. He said he's asked us before, but you guys didn't answer it. How important will the return of Niemann be to Norrköping, given they should really be aiming for a top 3-4 spot? We are going to touch on Norrköping in a future episode, Ben. So tune in, do subscribe, and we will answer that in the weeks to come because Norrköping are a team that I do want to focus on. Actually, they've been quite an interesting side this season, and they have lost a few players in the last window. As I said, Bergman Johannsson's gone, and so we will want to look at them in terms of the two questions from Norgefoot and Harry. I mean, certainly we haven't touched on them this evening, but Rosenborg with the lad up front, Holm. And also Konradsen Seider, your man Konradsen Seider, Steve. I think they may be 2 players who might make the list. Picked up some nice goals against Tromsø this weekend in that 3-2 win. And Vecchia as well got the winner, didn't he? So that's interesting. But yeah, we won't answer that in detail tonight because it's all about Malmö. It's all about the Champions League. We've covered the Conference League as well in terms of Rosenborg. In terms of Glimt. So hopefully that keeps you going for another week. But we'll be back. So keep your questions in if you've got any others you want to ask, and don't forget to drop us a like or subscribe, and also a review. Leave a rating, that kind of thing. It all helps us, improve the podcast. But I think we're going to leave it there now. So yeah, thanks so much for listening, and thank you, Steve, for joining me as always, and to Rafa as well. Really interesting insight from someone who's actually worked in Allsvenskan for a club and has given some valuable insight on the Champions League game.
Yes, thanks very much, everyone. Take care, stay safe. I will see you around next time. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.